Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel and Happy New Year. It is the 1st of January today, so it is the start of 2020, which is kind of exciting. It's a nice big round number. I'm not entirely sure about this malarkey of starting the new year on a Wednesday. That just seems a bit weird. It's a bit unsettling to start the new year and the new decade in the middle of the week, and then I was at work yesterday but not today, but I am back tomorrow. It's very confusing. Anyway, I thought I would go through all the books that I read in 2019. I do occasionally do book reviews on this channel, but not very often, because they require me to read books and understand them and then talk about them afterwards. But I did set myself the target last year, as I have done for the last few years, of reading 30 books, not 40. I've managed 30. I just managed it. I finished my final book on the 30th of December, so I did actually have a whole day of wiggle room there. And the last few books of the year were quite short, not going to lie. When I put them all into Goodreads, it told me, it gave me a review of 2019, and apparently my average book length was about 250 pages. So I wasn't reading super huge chunky books. But I think 30 books in a year is pretty good going. I'm quite pleased with that, given that it was the goal that I set myself. And I achieved it, so that's quite good. That's probably the only goal I managed to achieve last year. Anyway, I thought I would just run through them all quickly and kind of give a really quick yay or nay about the books. I'm not going to do a full in-depth review of each book because that would take freaking years. But a couple of them that were pretty good I will sort of pick out and tell you a little bit more about, but mostly it's just going to be a quick whiz through. So I've got my notes and I've got my books, my piles of books, so let's get started. So first up is Less by Andrew Sean Greer, and it was published in 2017, so it's a fairly recent book, and it won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction. It's about a gay man approaching his 50th birthday. He's an author living in San Francisco, and he decides to go on kind of a round the world tour of literary events just to really avoid the upcoming wedding of his former boyfriend. I think I really liked this, but I do think the author took it really close to the edge of self-indulgent, self-pitying character, but he does manage to remain likeable, and it is sort of referenced in the book that he comes very close to being quite irritating. But no, I did actually like it, and there was some bits later on that actually got me a bit emotional. So there's that. So next book, this is in the order that I read the books as well, so if it seems a bit random, that's why. So this is The Sands of Mars by Arthur C. Clarke, and it was published in 1951, and this was me wanting to read some kind of classic sci-fi. It's alright, it's kind of an adventure story about going to Mars. There's kangaroo type creatures that live there and breathable atmosphere and plants and things, so it's quite fun. It obviously does stick pretty close to 1950s society, with everyone getting married off when they're 20 and all the women becoming homemakers and whatnot. But the next book is Whose Body by Dorothy L. Sayers, published in 1923. So it's another kind of an old book, and I think this was her debut. She wrote so many books. It's a detective story, it's a murder mystery. It's okay. It's not going to change the world, and it is a bit racist, unfortunately. So this one is kind of a silly one. It's non-fiction. It's called Set Phasers to Stun, 50 Years of Star Trek, and it's by Marcus Berkman, who apparently has written other non-fiction books on sheds, I think. Yes, sheds. And cricket. So he's that kind of a chap. I'm sure he's lovely. Anyway, it's published in 2016, so it's quite recent, but obviously it is writing about Star Trek, and it is the original series of Star Trek that it's looking at, so it's talking about a TV programme that's 50 years old. It's not that. I'm sure there's better Star Trek books if you want a Star Trek book. I'm just a bit of a Star Trek nerd, I'm afraid. And Discovery had just come out, so it was cool again, or whatever. So Time Travel History by James Gleick, or Gleick. I'm sorry, I still don't know how to pronounce his surname at all. This was really interesting. It's non-fiction, and it's nice to include non-fiction books, I think, in your reading list and in kind of your top books of the year, because normally people who read tend to read fiction books. So he looks at time and time travel, and tries to discuss what is time, and then how time travel has emerged in popular culture, and then also some of the science and theories behind time travel. It was really interesting. I liked the stuff about the popular culture a bit more, and I could have done with more of that, because the science stuff was a little bit challenging to my poor brain. That was published in 2016, if I didn't already mention that. So the next book is Strange Weather in Tokyo by Hiromi Kawakami, published in 2001. I had already read a book by Kawakami, that I liked, and then my boyfriend bought me this, which was really nice because it was like an author that I'd already read. I'm not quite sure that he knew that, but it still was quite nice. And we were going to Tokyo, or we were about to go to Tokyo. I think he got me this for my birthday, so it was probably like a month before we went. Might have been, I think so. I did not like this book. I just really did not like one of the main characters. It's a love story between a young woman and, well, a woman in like her 30s and her former high school teacher, and he's just a creep. He's just like annoying. I did not get it. Now, this was my absolute favourite. It's the highlight of the year. Drive Your Plough Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk. She's a Polish author, and it was translated by Antonia Lloyd-Jones into English. It was published in 2009, and I really liked it. Tokarczuk won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2018, although she didn't get it awarded until 2019 because there was a bit of a scandal in the Nobel Prize judging some kind of sexual harassment thing, and unfortunately, a woman has to pay the price by not being given her prize until the next year. But anyway, she got the award in the end. But it's like an incredible eco-activism murder mystery book. It touches on animal rights, the treatment of women, particularly old women, poetry and murder, and horoscopes, astrology. It's just brilliant. The cover is pretty austere. I don't know if that's like a Polish thing, but it's set in a small village in Poland during the winter, so it's very harsh, it's very snowy. This older woman who is a fan of poetry and astrology and animals, and is very upset by the hunting and what she sees as the abuses of animals around her. And then people around her start to be killed or start to die, and they start to become increasingly suspicious circumstances around their deaths. And I don't know if this is making it sound good, but it really is good. Feminine Gospels by Caroline Duffy, published in 2002. It's poetry. I don't get poetry. I read it. I didn't get it. Someone explain it to me. A Man Lay Dead by Ngeo Marsh. I think that's how you pronounce her name. I think it's a woman. Actually, I don't know if it's a woman. I'm sorry, I don't know. Oh, she's among the crime queens, it says on the back, so it is a woman. Right. So yeah, it's crime, it's murder mysteries again. It's actually 3 books in one. So A Man Lay Dead, Enter a Murderer, and The Nursing Home Murder. Yeah, they're all right as murder mysteries go. They're pretty accessible and easy to read. So if you're looking for a quick read, they're all right. Flaubert's Parrot by Julian Barnes, published in 1984. I do really like Julian Barnes. I've read quite a few of his books now. I wouldn't say this is like my favourite, but I did enjoy it. It's about a man who's a retired doctor, and he is a big fan of the author Flaubert, and he goes to Paris to learn more about him. He already seems to be pretty much an expert in Flaubert anyway, but one of the things that he finds is a stuffed parrot that apparently was one that Flaubert had on his desk and is like an inspiration for a parrot that he wrote about in one of his books, and he's trying to sort of track down the real parrot. It is a lot about Flaubert and not like less about the character. I think slowly as the book goes on you learn more about the character, but it is a lot about Flaubert. So this book, Little by Edward Carey, published in 2018, I did actually do a video of, and if I can remember I will put like a thingamajig to link it, because this was really good as well. So it's a story of a girl who becomes an apprentice to a wax sculptor. She lives through the French Revolution, and then she ends up becoming the woman that was Madame Tussauds. I still don't know how to pronounce that. I'm sorry. I know I'm saying it wrong because it's not Madame Tussauds, because that's not how you say names in French. But it's really good, and it has all these like really like fun illustrations of body parts and things, because he's a wax sculptor that makes wax dummies, and obviously then that becomes the waxworks that she then becomes famous for. And then you've got it set in the context of the French Revolution. I looked it up afterwards, and it is based on her real story. I think he takes a few liberties with the truth just for dramatic purposes, but actually it's pretty close to how her life actually was, so it's pretty accurate. So this is another one that boyfriend bought me before our trip to Japan. So it's a Penguin book of Japanese short stories, published in 2018, but the stories do pan several decades. It's basically the 20th century, and so there's a lot of different themes running throughout it, Japanese culture, and things that run through Japanese culture, and obviously also the many changes and dramatic events of the 20th century in Japan, the Second World War, the atomic bombs, there's like tsunamis and earthquakes and natural disasters and that kind of thing. So a lot of changes as a result to Japanese society, and they're all just picked up in these different short stories by a range of different Japanese authors, and there are some really good ones in here, and just overall it's generally, I really liked reading the book. So this one was really popular with other people. Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman, published in 2017, so it's another quite recent one. Yeah, it was really popular. So apparently it's winner of the British Book Awards Book of the Year, according to the thing on the cover. I did not like it. I didn't think that writing was particularly good. I didn't think the characters were very believable. And it's supposed to be like hilarious, and I did not understand. None of it's funny. So it was completely lost on me. I just thought it was a bit rubbish. Moving on, The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers, published in 2014. I liked the name and I liked the cover. That's about it. It's just a bit silly. It's obviously sci-fi. It's a spaceship travelling through space on like kind of a mission-y type thing, project that they're doing, and they've got various like aliens living on board, but they all get along really well, and like nothing, there's no tension, there's no real drama, there's like everyone's friends, and even one of them goes on with like a really dark secret. She tells them all the secret after about 10 minutes, and they're just like, oh, it's fine. It's like there's just there's no tension, like nothing. It's just no. Apparently, I think there was like a series. I think she did a sequel, but I thought it was rubbish. Orlando by Virginia Woolf, published in 1928. So kind of a classic. It's okay. I think it's just not the style that I like. It's got some interesting ideas. Orlando is a character who changes sex, which is kind of throughout history, so lives for like across a span of several centuries, and changes sex a couple of times, maybe just once. I think it's one of the things that gets mentioned a lot about the book is that the character can change sex, and as if it's supposed to tell you a lot about the different sexes or social attitudes towards different sexes and genders, but I'm not quite sure that it does. Virginia Woolf wrote it really for her close personal friend, Vita Sackville West, and there's just a lot of in-jokes about Sackville West's like house and family, and like the name of her gardener is the same name as the gardener in the book, stuff like that, which there's a lot of like footnotes to explain all that to you, so you can read them or not, because it doesn't make a ton of difference to the story, but it did just kind of feel a smidge self-indulgent, shall we say. Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card, published in 1985. So I saw the film that came out a few years ago. I thought it was okay, but I didn't think it was like amazing. But I think it actually did really well, like money-wise and stuff. But it's based on this book. So Ender is 6 years old when he starts at this like battle school where he's being trained up to become this incredible leader who's going to lead an army to defeat this invasion force of like alien people that are coming to apparently, wipe out the earth. And so basically they kind of train him up by just being really horrible to him, and it is just like sort of torturing children for quite a lot of the book. And I just felt really sorry for little Ender. This one is A Natural History of Dragons by Marie Brennan, published in 2013. I bought it probably back in 2013, to be honest, whenever the paperback came out. I have had it in my collection for a while and just never got round to reading it. I was intrigued by the name and slightly by the cover, and then I could just never be bothered to read it. So it's not brilliant. About a woman called Lady Trent, who's just like posh and a bit annoying, who goes out chasing dragons, and I don't know, there's too much posh Lady Trent and not enough dragons, I think, is the problem. Sleeping Giants by Sylvian Nouvelle, I think, published in 2016. Again, it's one of those where I just really like the cover. I like the cover, I like the title, about a young girl who finds a giant hand underground, like a giant metal hand, and then as a adult, and she's a scientist, she is enlisted by a mysterious, creepy guy who must work for some kind of like the CIA or something creepy, to collect all the pieces of this giant person, which turns out to be like a giant weapon defense system. And yeah, it's got a weird structure to it because it's actually all written in interviews between this like creepy guy and the people that he's like enlisted / forced / blackmailed to help him with his quest to put together the giant person. I wanted it to be more like like on Star Trek, where they go out and they like discover things. I didn't want it to be like sort of a military operation creating some big weapon. I just wanted it to be like a nice, friendly, sciencey discovery thing. Timekeepers, How the World Became Obsessed with Time by Simon Garfield. So I just had a thing about time this year because it seemed to crop up quite a few times in the books that I was reading. It's another non-fiction and quite enjoyable. I really appreciated and liked his style with this book, the amount of research that he'd done. It's not a very long book. It's 330-ish pages long, but he covers so many topics. Like, it's all about how we are obsessed with time and we use it to control our lives, plan our lives, manage our lives and our societies. So he looks at watches and clocks and calendars and politically influenced calendars. He looks at artwork and museums and how we use museums to track time and history and preserve history. He talks to athletes like Roger Bannister, who was famous for running the 4-minute mile, and how his whole life or his achievements are kind of freezed in that moment when he won that race, or his whole life is boiled down to like 4 minutes. He looks at filibusters and cameras, and there's like a really wide-ranging selection of topics, all tied together by time. So I really liked it, and I ended up reading another book by him later on as well. So this is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline, published in 2011. It surprised me that this was so recent, actually, because this feels like the kind of book, I feel like, because I in my head associate it with Ender's Game, even though they're not, they have some similarities, but they're not that similar, actually. I kind of thought that they were both from the 80s, or just a bit older than this anyway. But yeah, it's okay. It's also became a film, apparently. And maybe this is the one that did really well then. I don't know. Yeah, it's all about like an online virtual kind of reality that people log into, and then there's this big quest to solve all these puzzles, and be the first one to solve the puzzle means that you win lots and lots of money, but also you win then control of the Oasis, which is the online reality that everyone logs into. And so the character at the heart of the book is trying to win for himself, but also to try and stop this big evil corporation from getting control of the Oasis as well. So it's kind of a David and Goliath kind of thing. So Just My Type, a book about fonts by Simon Garfield, published in 2010. So like I said, this is the same author as the Timekeepers book, but this is a book about fonts. I really like typography, and I thought this would be really interesting, and it kind of is, but I think there's not perhaps as much scope to talk about fonts and typography as there is with time to have as wide-ranging a book. So it is a book about fonts, basically, at the end of the day, which I can't deny, he says that on the cover, so I can't blame him. But I think I liked the Timekeepers book because it talked about other subjects, or like, just it had a bit of breadth. So this is Science-ish by Rick Edwards and Michael Brooks, published in 2018. Apparently these guys have some kind of podcast called Science-ish or something like that, and at least one of them is on TV being a presenter or something. Never heard of them, don't know anything about them. I think I've even seen a picture of them, and I still don't know who they are, so I don't know if it's popular or not. Yeah, they run through it. The peculiar science behind the movies is the sort of subtitle. So they go through a few popular science fiction films. So The Martian, Jurassic Park, Interstellar, Planet of the Apes, Back to the Future, 28 Days Later, The Matrix, Gattaca, Ex Machina, and Alien, and just run through some of the science in the films. And I kind of like this because it starts off with the film as the starting point, and it mentions like something that happens in the film and is that possible, but then it kind of uses that as a starting point and kind of goes in not in another direction, but like it extrapolates that and starts talking about other things that are kind of happening in the science world now. So Ex Machina, it starts talking about other advances in robotics and stuff like this. So it doesn't just stick just to the specifics of the film. I think if you've not seen these films, like I haven't seen some of them, and if you really don't know what the plot is of that film, A, it's going to like spoil the plot for you, and B, some of it might be a bit lost on you. But because they are quite popular films and quite mainstream, I think most people will have seen at least most of them, if you're interested in sci-fi and fantasy and stuff. So this is The Custard Heart by Dorothy Parker, published in 1944. So I think this is the one the boyfriend said was cheating, because you can see how short it is. It's obviously just a short story. It's like 50 pages long, and obviously they're not full-size pages. But it's my challenge, it's my rules, and I say this counts. I had that in Guillaume Marsh book that had 3 books in one, and I counted that as one, so I feel like this evens out. Yeah, it's obviously a really short story. It actually, I think, has 3 stories in it. That's how short they are. So yeah, The Custard Heart is about a wealthy woman who sort of has flings with men, and what she really wants is a baby. I think Big Blonde was the one that kind of stood out to me more in here, about a woman who, she's got blonde hair, she's like quite buxom and fun-loving, and then she gets married to a man and doesn't really work out, and they end up both drinking a lot, and she ends up becoming essentially an alcoholic, I suppose, or like a high-functioning alcoholic, where alcohol is just a big factor in her life. and her life just kind of doesn't really go anywhere. The marriage breaks down and she just kind of has flings with various like married men and stuff, and she's just not happy. It's really not, it's very sad. It's a bit of a downer, but it did stand out more. I don't know, I liked it. I hadn't ever read any Dorothy Parker, so this is Going to Hurt by Adam Kay, so published in 2017. This is Adam Kay, who was a NHS doctor, an obstetrician and gynecology doctor, and he ended up quitting because he kind of couldn't handle the stress, the hours, the low pay, the damage to his relationship. It causes his long-term relationship to break down because he never gets to see his partner. He misses birthdays, Christmas, all that kind of stuff. Holidays get cancelled. And then there's a situation towards the end where a woman, I think he's doing a cesarean and the woman ends up going into a coma. I don't really think it's anything that he's done wrong, but that kind of scared him, and the combination of all these factors meant that he left medicine. He's actually like a screenwriter now or something. I couldn't help feeling like it's kind of a shame that he's not a doctor anymore, just because it feels like when you've worked that hard and you've got that knowledge and that skill, and you can actually, like, you've delivered babies and you save people's lives, that it's a shame that you don't then use that. But at the same time, when you read the book, you can totally see why. This is a collection of his diaries when he was a junior doctor. Junior doctor is like everything below consultant. So junior doctor isn't just like an intern or whatever. It's like most doctors are junior doctors. I think it's a bit of a misleading term, but basically it just sounds awful, like the pressure that they're under and what they have to deal with, and the long shifts, and how anyone can be expected to work at a high level, making high risk decisions all the time after they've been at work for 12 hours and they've barely slept and they've not been home. At one point he falls asleep in the car park at the hospital and then wakes up the next day and just goes straight into work because he's so tired. If you live in the UK, it is worth a read because it's horrifying, because this is the NHS and it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. Unfortunately, with the recent election, things are just going to get worse. But it is an important read to really understand what is happening, I think. So this one I can't pronounce. Bonjour Tristesse. Sorry. It's French. Francois Sagan. I'm sorry again, that's the author. I can't pronounce these things. So it was published in 1954. It's very French. There are two stories in here actually, but Bonjour Tristesse is, I think it translates to like hello sadness, hello melancholy, that kind of thing. And it's about very French teen love affairs, written by a very young author. I think she was only about 17 when she wrote the book. It's very atmospheric and French. It's just really French. It just feels French. This is Metroland by Julian Barnes, again Barnes, published in 1980. It's okay. It's about two friends that are quite cynical in their view of the world and the bourgeois people around them as they see them, and as they get older, their lives perhaps diverge a little bit towards the end, as one of the characters, Christopher, becomes part of perhaps of the bourgeois middle class that he was so dismissive of. Again, I wouldn't say it's like my favourite of his books, but it's alright. So Christmas Pudding by Nancy Mitford, published in 1932. I just wanted a Christmassy book, so this is the one that I picked. I bought it whilst we were in London in November for a boyfriend's birthday, so it's kind of nice. I really like the cover as well, it just seemed like festive. Although I have destroyed it because it was just permanently raining all the time in December, so it got wet in my bag. It's kind of what Nancy Mitford wrote about, just like rich upper class people, although they don't tend to have too much money, but they are really wealthy and upper class. And it's just like a bunch of them get together to have a Christmas party, and just kind of a ragtag bunch of people thrown into a house over Christmas. Essentially, that's all that happens. But I quite like Nancy Mitford's writing. They were a weird family, the Mitfords, and they were kind of Googling because some of them became socialists and some of them fell in love with Hitler, and they all just kind of went all over the place. So 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. It was published in 1828. It's not very long. It's one of those classics that you just think should be longer. There's like a mysterious creature that they all think is a big whale, but then it turns out when they get there that it's actually just a big giant a giant submarine that's made out of like futuristic technology, so it can like withstand harpoons or whatever. But then the captain of the ship kind of holds them hostage, but they go on these like undersea adventures where they go out hunting in like seaweed forests under the sea and things. Yeah. Our Man in Havana by Graham Greene, published in 1958. So it's about an English expat who makes a living in Havana selling vacuum cleaners, and in order to afford his daughter's kind of extravagant lifestyle, he is tempted into spying and committing espionage, but he has no reports to send back, so he just starts faking them and sends fake reports using fake agents or sub-agents. But then people actually start dying for real, and his life then becomes in danger, and it just illustrates quite clearly the dangerous nonsense that is international espionage. So the last book of the year, picked because it's quite short, is The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, published in 1895. Again, another time-related book. So a time traveller goes forwards into the future, into the year, it's like 827,000 or something like that, AD, where he meets the beautiful Eloy, who live above the ground, and then the kind of creepy Morlocks who live in the dark below the ground. I think my problem with this book is I actually kind of wanted more. It is too short. I mean, like I said, I finished it on the 30th of December, so I didn't have too much time. I didn't want it to do too much longer. But I kind of wanted him to have more adventures. Like, if you build a time machine, don't just go to one, keep having adventures. But yeah, he just kind of does that one trip. And why would you go so far in the future? Anyway. So that is my 30 books, so thank you for staying with me through all of those. So there are some Japanese influences, there are a lot of books about time, a few that were non-fiction, which is nice, and a good range of time periods, I think, with the earliest being 1828 and then the latest being 2018 in terms of when they were published. The best book was Drive Your Plough Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk, strongly recommend. If not that, then Little or the Japanese Short Stories was probably the third best. Overall, a good collection of books. I'm not sure what I'm going to do for next year. I don't know if I'm going to set myself the challenge of 30 books again, or whether I'm going to try and read longer books, different books. In my head, I kind of want to read Moby Dick. I don't know why, but I do know that it's quite long. So I don't think I could read 30 Moby Dicks. So maybe I'll just try and go for certain books that I really want to read. I have accumulated quite a few books over Christmas, from Christmas, so I do already have a pile of books to work my way through. So come back in a year's time and I'll go through my books of 2020. That's it. If you have liked the video, please give me a like. If you have any tips, any ideas, suggestions for books for me to read in 2020, please leave them in the comments below, and if you want to see more videos, please subscribe.